Man, it feels like ages since I've seen you guys. It feels like forever. Actually, it feels like last year since I got to hang out with you guys. Look at that. 1 point for Michael. No, I'm just kidding. Well, guys, hey, we're so excited for you guys to be here at First Sunday, the first Sunday of 2018. It's the biggest night of the month on the best night of the week for you guys, and we're so glad that you're here. If this is your first time here, thanks for joining us tonight. You could have been anywhere else, but you came here, and so we're glad that you're here. I know that myself and Matt and our rest of our leaders would love the opportunity to get to know you guys in the after party, so we hope that you'll come up and introduce yourself if we haven't met you already. And if you've been here before and you call Catalyst home, well, we're glad you're back. We are starting a brand new series tonight called Heroes. Now, when we think of heroes, we're conditioned to think of people or superheroes like Batman or Superman or Ant-Man or the Hulk, Captain America, Thor, Cyclops, and so many other different superheroes. Now, these superheroes possess all kind of different qualities and things that we think of in superheroes, right? Like they can fly, they can shoot lasers out of their eyes, some have cold breath, some are like lightning fast, some are super strong, and other superheroes, they're just filthy rich and they have like cool costumes and cool equipment or cool suits that they can fight crime with, right? That's what we think of superheroes. Now, just to see where we are in the room, I want to know, if you had to choose between these two superheroes, what would it be? Would you be Batman or Superman? Okay, hold on. Let's do this. By a scream. Let's hear you scream for Batman. Yeah. Okay, Superman. First of all, you're a boy. You shouldn't scream that loud. Clearly, Batman wins. And I'll tell you personally that I am a Batman fan. Because this guy, if you think about it, he doesn't have any actual powers. He just has grit and a lot of money, right? Shh. So we're conditioned to think of those as what we call superheroes. And then we have the category of what I would call like everyday heroes. These are your police officers, your firefighters, your military personnel. These people help us in life-threatening situations. They protect our city, our state, our country, and our world from bad things and bad people, right? And that's what we would consider heroes. And I've always been really fascinated with the concept of a hero. Like, what really makes a hero a hero? Is it the ability to fly? Or is it the ability to shoot lasers out of your eyes? Do you have to be filthy rich? Do you have to know how to work the force, as somebody just screamed out over there? Like, is that what makes a hero? Well, let me tell you that I wanted to put this to the test. I wanted to see if it was possible for a person to possess hero-like qualities, okay? So let me tell you this really quick story. When I was about 6 years old, I wanted to see if humans could really be superheroes, if they actually existed. And the only way to do that is by testing out one of what we would qualify as a superhero trait, right? So I wanted to see if it was possible for humans to fly without wings or being in an airplane or however else a human would fly. Now, the only problem was I needed like a test subject because, you never want to test yourself. Like, that's just the dumbest thing in the world, right? You never want to use yourself. So I started thinking like, okay, who can I test? Who can I use to do this experiment? And God answered my prayers. Right when I was about to give up, my little sister walks in the room. Okay? And so her name is Michelle. And I said, Michelle, come here. And I said, look, I believe you can fly. Okay? Now, my sister was 3 at the time, and she was as gullible as they are, okay? Something to do with girls. I'm just kidding. So you're like, I'm done, okay? So I said, Michelle, I believe you can fly. And she was like, really? And I was like, really? You can. So here's what we're going to do. I want you to climb on top of this dresser here. This dresser is about this high, okay? And I believe you can fly to the bed. Now, the bed was a good 15 to 20 feet away from the dresser, okay? So I said, you can do this. I'm going to count to 3 and then jump, okay? So I was like, 1, 2, and before I got to 3, she was gone, okay? And she like took off like Supergirl, spirited little 3-year-old flying through the air. It was the cutest thing in the world to see your little sister in the air. And it felt like eternity. I was like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. And she's flying, and as she's flying, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've just proven that humans could, and as I thought that, reality hit pretty quickly, and I realized that she wasn't gonna make it. Not only did she not make it, but my little sister dove headfirst into the inboard, okay? So, I wish I had a video. Back in my day, they didn't have videos, so, whatever. So when she dove, she hit the headboard, forehead on the board, neck throw back, head fall on the ground, okay? In that moment, my life flashed before my eyes, and I realized I had to make a quick decision. Save my sister or save myself. Now, what would a hero do in this situation? Save yourself, right? So my sister's crying. She's got blood everywhere, okay? So I calm her down. I put her in the corner, and I throw a blanket over her, and I go out the house, okay? I leave. I'm done, okay? I'm out. So I learned 2 valuable lessons that day, all right? And I want you to take this with you. The first lesson that I learned is you cannot hide a bloody 3-year-old little girl, okay? Just not gonna happen. Your mom will always find out, and it will not be fun for the punishment. The second thing that I learned that day is that a hero necessarily doesn't have to be someone that can fly or have special ability or be filthy rich. That a hero could be somebody who just is willing to take the extra step and to go the extra way. And what that meant is that there could possibly be a hero in each and every one of us. Now, you might be sitting there today saying, well, okay, that's a funny story and all, but I'm not a hero. No one would trust me to save their life. No one would really call me the hero type. I don't think God could use me to be a hero in anybody's life. I've done so many things wrong. People know who I am. I kind of have a reputation for doing bad things. I've made mistakes. There's no way that God could use me. And I would say, I think you might be wrong about that. There's maybe some of you here tonight that would say, you know what, Michael, I'm really a nobody. I kind of keep to myself. I'm quiet. I'm a loner. I really don't talk to people. I don't have a lot of friends. I'm not the most popular. How am I going to be a hero in somebody's life? I don't think God could use me. And I would say, I think you're wrong too. And tonight, to prove that you're both wrong, we're going to look at a story about Saul. Now, you may think there's a couple different Sauls in the Bible. We're not talking about the Old Testament Saul. We're actually talking about the New Testament Saul, who ends up renaming himself Paul. So you might be familiar more with that name. But before he became Paul, he was Saul. And Saul was, we're going to talk about Saul and his conversion, who was the hero in his life, and how he became a hero to millions of people. So if you have a Bible or a Bible app, I want you to go ahead and turn to Acts chapter 9. And while you're getting there, let me kind of set the stage for what has taken place. So far, what has happened is Jesus went to the cross, he died, And after he died, he came back and appeared to a bunch of people, and they were like, oh my gosh, Jesus is here. And some people were like, I don't believe you. Let me put my finger through the hole in your hand. Jesus is like, look, woohoo. And they were like, oh, that's creepy. And Jesus is like, yeah, you thought it was creepy, but look what I'm about to do, right? And then like Jesus was like chilling with them, and they went to In-N-Out. They went to Five Guys. They did all the great stuff, right? And then after they were done hanging out, Jesus was like, look, I got to go back to the Father, to the Pops. Got to go hang out with my peeps in heaven. I'm out. Hashtag, I'll be back soon, right? And then he like floated up to heaven, like, ooh, right? You heard the story, okay? So, but before he left, he promised that he would send a helper. And then one day there was a bunch of like people inside of this room. They were kind of like praying, trying to figure out what to do. And then like this big wind thingy comes in, and they start speaking in these weird things called tongues. They were like, la, la. It was crazy, right? And that was the day that we know now as Pentecost, right? So that was like also what we know is the beginning of the church and this Jesus movement, okay? So that's where we're at. While all that was happening, there was this guy, his name was Saul, who was not really for Jesus. He was not really all about Jesus. He was not feeling Jesus. Actually, he was completely against it. He believed that if you were following Jesus, you were actually in the wrong, that you were doing something bad. He fully believed it was his calling to rid the world of those who claimed to follow Jesus or who thought Jesus was the Son of God. And this is where we're going to pick up the story. So in Acts chapter 9, starting at verse 1, it'll be on the screen. It says, meanwhile, Saul was uttering that with every breath and was eager to kill the Lord's followers. So he went to the high priest. He requested letters addressed to the synagogues in Damascus, asking for their cooperation in the arrest of any followers of the way he found there. He wanted to bring them, both men and women, back to Jerusalem in chains. As he was approaching Damascus on this mission, a light from heaven suddenly shone down around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Who are you, Lord? Saul asked. So we have this man running around making threats to put people in jail, and if necessary, he would even murder them. And if they were found to be associated with this way of Jesus. So who is this Saul, and why is he so bent on rooting out all of these Jesus followers? Well, let me give you a little background on Saul. Saul was a very knowledgeable man of the law, okay? So in the Old Testament, you had the Ten Commandments, but on those Ten Commandments, you also had these other laws that Moses had given the people to how to live. And it ended up being some almost 600 to 800 different laws that these people had to live by, okay? And so Paul was a very knowledgeable man of the law. He studied them. We also refer to those people who had studied the law and teach the law as the word Pharisee. So Paul was, in essence, a Pharisee, which means man of the law. Saul had spent most of his life studying all the Old Testament rules and laws, and so he had an in-depth knowledge and a keen understanding of the laws and believed that everyone should live in strict obedience of them. So imagine this being like your mom or dad who was like super strict, right? You couldn't text past 8 o'clock. You couldn't have your phone before 10 o'clock. You had to brush your teeth and wash your face and eat breakfast, a healthy breakfast with broccoli, right? You had to do your homework right when you got home after school. There was nothing. You couldn't have Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. You couldn't have any of that stuff until you were 32. You couldn't get married till you were 40, and you weren't allowed to die until you're 80, right? That kind of strict, okay? That's what it was like to live in the Old Testament. Imagine somebody like that who watched your every move, was like, hey, you shouldn't be breathing right now. That is wrong, right? Imagine that, okay? That's what it was like. And Saul was just like that. So to him, if you were not living according to the law, but according to Jesus, then you were disobeying the Old Testament laws. Saul would probably go as far as to say that if you were following Jesus, then you were following a false god or a false prophet. Now, I want you to take notice of something. In another translation, the same verse, in Luke, verse 3, it says, now as he went on his way. This is another translation. Did you catch that? I really want you to catch that. Put that back on the screen. Now as he went on his way. I think Luke wanted us to see that Saul was not only going on his way, his way to Damascus, but I also want you to know, and I think what Luke also wants to see, that he was going his own way. It's not just the literal, it's the metaphorical. See, one thing I love about the Bible is that if you just read it at its surface level, you just read it and take it for what it is, you'll learn a lot and it'll be good. But if you actually take some time and dive right into it and get a little bit more in depth, man, you'll begin to see that the Jesus movement plays from beginning to end. You see Jesus at Genesis 1:1 all the way through Revelation to the end of it. And in this verse, I think we should go just a little bit deeper. So if Saul was going his own way, then obviously he wasn't going the way of Jesus. Saul was doing his own thing. He was doing what he thought was right, what he felt was best, and what made most sense to him, culturally and personally. Now, doesn't that sound a bit familiar to you? You doing your own thing, you doing it your own way. How many of us have been in that place, doing our own thing in our own way, and we say things like, I don't need God. I mean, that's just for my parents. I go to church on Sundays. I sit. I take the nasty communion that tastes like styrofoam, right? I do that thing. Some of you are like, right? I do that thing, and then I go home, and I, hang out with my friends. I don't really need God. That's just something my parents are, superstitious about. If you don't pray to God, you're going to get struck by lightning. Woo, right? Some of you feel that way. Some of you think just like that. Some of you think, I don't need Jesus to tell me how to live. I can be a good person, and I'm going to get to heaven. I don't need to follow Jesus. Some of you think, I can be in this relationship even though it's making me do things, say things, and become the kind of person I never thought I would be. Some of you think, I can look at that website. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's just me by myself in the quiet room. Some of you think, I can give myself away to that boy or that girl because I'm in love. And you think that's okay. You go your own way and you do your own thing. And this is where we find Saul going his own way and doing his own thing. Now, speaking of the way, which is what I want you guys to know, that the way was also another name that they called this Jesus movement. Jesus had a description for this way. He would say things like, if you were following him, you were living in the light. One of Jesus' disciples, Matthew, records a conversation between Jesus and some of those who would end up following him. In this conversation, Jesus tells these people that following him would allow them to become the light in an otherwise dark world. Now, what's cool about this statement is another disciple of Jesus writing described Jesus as being the light that shines in the darkness and that the darkness could not overcome it. Which leads me back to Saul. If Saul was going his own way, then he was going the opposite way of Jesus. And if Jesus is the light, then Saul wasn't going anywhere near the light, but by way of darkness. And when we talk about darkness in and of itself, we have to talk about the emptiness and the loneliness and the despair and the pain and the hurt, the shame, the regret, and sin. You can't talk about darkness in a person's life without talking about all those things that go along with darkness. And if we're being honest tonight, some of us, including myself, have been there. Some of us are either in the midst of darkness right now. Some of us are at the doorstep of entering some dark times. And some of us are actually just getting ready to exit our darkness. If we're being honest, we've been there, and just like Saul, you've been going your own way, opposite of the light. So when I talk about being a hero, for those of you who are kind of in that darkness right now, and you say, well, Michael, man, you don't know me. I've done some bad things. There's no way that God would want to use me to be a hero in somebody's life. I've made so many mistakes. I've done so much wrong. I've gone too far, and I'm barely even holding on to this faith as is. How can I help someone see Jesus when I can barely see Jesus? And a lot of you in this room believe that very thing. But I want to tell you, here's what we believe. We believe that God can use the most unlikeliest of people who are in the darkness and bring them back to life in the light. I'll say that again. God can use the most unlikeliest of people who are in the darkness and bring them back to life in the light. You see, Jesus provided a way from the darkness to the light. Jesus reached us with arms wide open and invites us to come live a life of hope, love, grace, and truth. Life more fulfilled, more purposeful, more meaningful, more wholesome. He became the hero we needed in our lives so that we could become the hero in the lives of other students who need to see Jesus. Now, I know some of you said, that's easier said than done, Michael. You don't know my story. You don't know what I've done. Maybe you're here tonight and you're thinking, Michael, you don't know my background. Well, let me tell you, Jesus says, give you his background. Give him your background. Maybe you say, well, you don't know my shame. Well, Jesus says, give him your shame. Well, you don't know my regrets. Well, Jesus says, give him your regrets. Well, you don't know my pain. Well, Jesus says, bring your pain. Well, this is out of my comfort zone. I don't know if I can step out and be brave and strong. Well, Jesus said, he'll give you comfort. Well, Michael, I don't know if I'm prepared to do this. I got so much. Jesus says he'll prepare you. Well, I don't know how to be a hero. Well, Jesus says he'll show you. To become a hero in the life of someone else, all you have to do is accept the fact that you can't do it on your own. You can't go your own way. And you have to go the way of Jesus, to go from darkness to light. And once you do that, the Bible promises. It promises that now that you're in the light, you're on your way to becoming a hero for someone else. If you don't believe me, in the book of Ephesians, the writer wants us to know that when we move from going our own way into the way of Jesus, a significant change happens. Paul writes in Ephesians, says, for once you were full of darkness, but now you have the light from the Lord, so live as people of the light. See, when you live as a student of the light, everything you do, everything you say, the way you carry yourself, how you treat others, how you dress is a reflection of Jesus to someone. And when you live as a student of the light, when you tell your background and the things and the mistakes that you've made and all like that stuff, here's what people are doing. It's really crazy, and it blows my mind every time when someone asks me, like, my backstory, and I'm a little shy because I'm like, oh, they're going to judge me, and I start telling them this. Instead of judging me, a lot of times people are like, they take a breath because they realize that I am just the same as them, that they have some messed up stuff in their past, that they've done some things they're not too proud of. And it actually makes it a lot more easier for me to have a conversation about Jesus with them because they know I've been there. I've experienced that. And the same can be said for you as well. People will see that Jesus didn't leave you where he found you. Once you made that move from darkness to light, Jesus will begin to shape you and prepare you to become the hero for somebody else. So as we pick up Saul's story, it says, in verse 5, and the voice replied, I am Jesus, the one whom you are persecuting. Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. Now the men of Saul stood speechless, for they heard a sound of someone's voice, but saw no one. Saul picked himself up off the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he was blind. So his companions led him by hand to Damascus. This part of the story always cracks me up. I mean, can you imagine being those guys and like you're just walking along, you're probably talking about sports and how the Chiefs blew a 21-3 lead, sorry Matt, and like you lost the game and it really sucks, and like Indiana, Purdue, they're all horrible, right? And the Colts suck forever. So it's like that's what they're talking about, and then like boom! right? That's probably how they felt. But instead, see, you got to see me. You're like, oh my gosh, scary black guy on the stage, right? Right? But for them, they couldn't see it. They couldn't see. All they heard was like this big boom, or maybe I'm assuming, and then like this voice talking to Saul, like, Saul, Saul. I don't know what Jesus sounds like. I imagine he sounds like a really cool dude with a deep voice. Saul, why are you persecuting me? And they're like, okay, have you been smoking something? Because I'm hearing something, but I don't see anybody talking. What is going on here, right? Like, they're probably freaking out. A story, it always cracks me up. But did you catch what Jesus did to Saul? Right? He tells Saul, hey, you persecuting me. I'm going to use you. Saul gets up, and he goes to open his eyes because he's like freaked out. He has his eyes closed the whole time. And when he opens his eyes, it's still dark. It's still dark. And here's why I think, and this is my next point, is that in order to become a hero, we must fully rely on God for our ability to be a hero. It sounds so simple, right? You hear it all the time. Just trust in God and everything else will come from it, right? It's easier said than done. But it's actually harder to do. There are many of us in the room who have thought, you know what? I've been following Jesus. I'm good to go. I can do this. I've got it all figured out. And what we have come to find out, or will find out very soon enough, is that we can't do this on our own. We can't accomplish all the things God wants us to accomplish without God. We can't accomplish those things that God has in store for us unless we trust in Him. So I'm sure that that's the exact reason why Jesus left Saul blind. Because he immediately wanted Saul to not now try to go his own way again, but to fully trust in him. But Jesus wanted to show him that he desperately needed him. Jesus is trying to get you and I to understand that at that same conclusion as well. Apart from Jesus, we can't do this life on our own. We can't help someone know Jesus on our own, and we can't love people on our own, and we can't move from darkness to light on our own. We need Jesus to be the hero in our lives so that we can become the hero in the lives of other students. And that's exactly what we see here in Saul's story. Jesus tells Saul to get up and fully depend on him for everything. And Jesus would direct his next steps and use someone else to be a hero in Saul's life. So we talked about being someone who's had a really bad past, maybe not a past that you're really proud of, and yet God still used somebody just like that who would eventually go on to write so many books of the Bible and witness and tell people about Jesus, and millions would come to know Jesus through Saul. But there's one more hero in this story. Look at verse 9 real quick. It says, now there was a believer in Damascus named Ananias. The Lord spoke to him in a vision, calling, Ananias. Yes, Lord. He replied. The Lord said, go to the straight street to the house of Judas, and when you get there, ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul. He is praying to me right now. I have shown him a vision of a man named Ananias coming in and laying hands on him so he can see again. But Lord, exclaimed Ananias, I have heard many people talk about this terrible thing this man has done to believers in Jerusalem. And he is authorized by the leading priests to arrest everyone who calls upon your name. But the Lord said, go, for Saul is my chosen instrument to take my message to the Gentiles and to the kings as well as to the people of Israel. And I will show him how much he must suffer for my name's sake. So we don't know very much about this Ananias, except for the fact that God picked him to be a part of Saul's story. Ananias was basically a nobody. He wasn't some important teacher or pastor. He wasn't the most popular guy on the street or in his neighborhood or among his friends. He was just minding his business, and God comes out of nowhere and is like, hey, Ananias, bro, I need your help. And I was like, yeah, Lord, I'll do whatever you got, man. I'm ready to go. Pick me. Yay. And then God's like, all right, you ready? I want you to go hang out with this murderer. And I was like, wow. See, what had happened, God, was, because, like, if that was me, I'd have been making every excuse under the book. See, what happened, God, was, like, I really was going to go, but then, like, as you were talking to me, like, oh, I remembered I got an assignment from my teacher. It's J term, and I got to get stuff done. Or, like, God, my grandma needs her bunions scrubbed this week, and I promised her that I was coming because I love my grandma because she going to die soon. I'm going to get all her money. So, like, I got to go. Like, I got to take care of that, God. Like, I'd be making every single excuse known to man. And that's what Isaiah is like, but God, like, this guy is a murderer. Why in the world would I go? And it was almost as if, like, you ever, like, be talking to your parents and they tell you to do something and you start making excuses and they just completely ignore your excuses and it was like, okay, so yeah, you make excuses, go do what I just said, right? That's basically what God said to Ananias. And I was like, God, I don't know about this. He's scary. He's crazy. And God's like, all right, you're good? All right, go do what I said, right? I bet Ananias was like, man, I could never do nothing, man, right? He's probably upset. But he goes. He trusts God, and he becomes a hero, which brings me to my final point, and that's this, is that God can use a nobody to do the work of a somebody and make them a hero in someone's life. God can do the work. God can take a nobody and make him a somebody and change the course of everyone's life. See, being a hero is not about having the good looks or the flashy suits or the cool powers, the wealth of money, being the most popular, being the most holy person. Being a hero is about our recognition that we are dependent on God's grace. And apart from him, we are nothing. Being a hero means that no matter what your background, the things we've done, God can still use a person like yourself to make a difference in this world. Being a hero means that even a nobody who no one knows can be used by God to do the work of a somebody and be a hero in somebody's life. So as I close out tonight, I'm not sure where you are in this story tonight. Some of you are holding on to some pretty bad stuff. Some stuff that you're ashamed of, stuff that's causing quite a bit of pain in your life right now. You think you're too far off, that God could never use you. And you just think, you know what, God, I just don't know. I don't know if you can. Ugh. There's some of you in this room tonight, you think you're a nobody. You work hard, you keep your head down, you do what you got to do, but you think no one notices. You think, you know what? I'm not the most popular, not the most handsome, I'm not the most athletic, I'm not the smartest. I just do me, and that's okay. You think you're a nobody. I want to tell you tonight that Saul was going his own way. He's got a pretty messed up background. And Ananias, he was a nobody. And God used those two men to change the course of history and eternity for you. You're here, and you're hearing this message, and you come to this church because of Saul and Ananias. A somebody and a nobody became very important to your life and your faith. And so I want you to know, there are three truths I want you to leave here tonight with. The first one is, you're never too far off. And it's never too late for God to move you from darkness to light to become a hero. The second is that when you come to the end of yourself, when you realize that you can't do it on your own, that's when your chance of becoming a hero becomes reality. And the last thing is, God wants to use the so-called nobodies, the people who are quiet and behind the scenes, to do the work of a somebody so that you and I could experience the life of Jesus. Let's pray. Jesus, we thank you so much for your grace and your truth, Father. We thank you that you love us, God, and that you yourself became a hero in our life, that you were willing to give it all up so that we can experience you, Jesus. Thank you so much for putting a bunch of nobodies in our life, a bunch of bad people who've made so many mistakes, so that we can know and love you and serve you more. In Jesus' name, amen.